Hello, welcome everyone to our live today with Aisha Smutty Hussain. We'll talk about psychedelics and we'll talk about spiritual awakening. And let me invite her to join us. Please come on in. Hi everyone. Hi Alma, hi Denise, hi Annie. Alright. Welcome. We're just waiting for our guest for a few minutes. Please come on in. So I just sent her invite. Hello. Hi.
Hi, my darling.
Wait, I'm having trouble making that stick straight.
Uh-oh.
Awesome. That works. Yay, hi.
I can see you perfectly.
Yeah, me too. How are you?
I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
I was just doing some traveling, as I hear you are also doing some traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm returning now to LA, to home, and getting back into the swing of things. I was up a little late last night submitting an abstract for a queering psychedelics book. So
Ooh,
yeah, I'm right back into the mix of things and talking about the fun stuff. So
awesome. Well, thank you for joining today. I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited about the topic and having you here with me for that. Um, so can I start by introducing you very briefly, and then you'll add on anything that feels relevant to that?
sounds good.
All right. So you're wearing many hats. You've been wearing many ever since I met you. You founded the Violet, who is or used to be, I'm not quite sure, a pop-up porn cinema. You're generally a creator of portals or experiences, spaces where transformation occurs and where you really take people on journeys. That could be parties, that could be healing journeys, that could be a lot of all of the above and more. I remember you calling yourself a pleasure activist. And I know one of your heart mission is to really eradicate shame, specifically around sexuality, but even beyond. What else would you like to add to all of those?
That was pretty good. And actually, I think you called me a pleasure activist. I remember getting the text and you were like, Aisha, have you read this book? You need to read this book. It's the same stuff that you say. So I think that was something was
Ah,
received as a compliment from you, really, because I'm
wow.
so honored to be in the likes of her. But I think you pretty much nailed it. To me, I really have a passion for creating safe spaces where people can discover who they are, parts of themselves that have always been
Mm,
there, but they just didn't have the room or the community or the safety, a place to explore. So that looks a lot of different ways. You mentioned the porn cinema. So it is one of my kinks to gather hundreds of strangers in a room and have them watch porn together and then talk about it. I've done that all over the world. Um, with COVID, that kind of went on pause. We went online for a little bit, but so much of our mission was the in real life aspect, because porn you watch behind a screen anyways, or most people do. So
mm,
it wasn't really as transformative as we had really set out to be. And yeah, at the end of the day, I have my purpose of eradicating rape culture. And rape culture is really perpetuated by shame. So shame is the thing that I try to take and um, eradicate with empathy. Because empathy is
hmm
the soul's way of connecting to one another. And when we do that, we can see people as humans instead of an other or marginalized or however that ends up being when shame occurs.
hmm Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And so, what do you do today? What's your main activity, way of sharing knowledge, eradicating shame?
Today, mostly the way I'm gathering people into safe containers is a group coaching program
Hmm.
called the Love Lulu. And what I do is I gather people who are interested on going on a sexual awakening journey. It's a 30-day journey, which was inspired by my love of Whole30. I don't know if you are familiar with Whole30, but a regimented
It's a diet,
program.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a that's an elimination diet. But really what happened for me when I did that program, and I've been doing it for 6 years, twice a year, is in a 30-day program, you can really connect to your own willpower and the power of yourself. And you can see
Hmm.
how every day doing something really small connects you to who you are. And so that's why I chose a 30-day. And it actually is a sexual awakening journey supported by a medicine microdosing program. And the point of that is to get us out of the normal rut that we get into around sexuality, around our identity and who we think we are, and
Hmm.
really expand our awareness to something beyond
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question. So
that.
we're here today to talk about sexual awakening and psychedelics. And so first, let's talk about each separately, and then see how they merge. What does sexual awakening means to you? What is it?
Ooh, a sexual awakening means to me a heightened moment or elongated moment of awareness around sexual energy,
Okay.
how sex works in this world. And to me, sex is connection. So when I bubble that up, it's really just a heightened awareness around connection. And when someone has an awakening, it can be a brief split second, or it can be a longer moment that takes a lot of unfolding in it. But you come to a part of yourself that you recognize to be something different, the way either you individually work in the broader context of the world, or you individually in how you work with yourself around sex and sexuality.
Okay. So it's either a process or an event or window of time where suddenly there's a new awareness or light or understanding on our sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's very similar to making the parallel with like spiritual enlightenment experiences. It's very similar, right? You can have a crazy experience with meditation or psychedelics that just suddenly makes you understand, oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can also just be this gradual process where you just every day unfold a little bit more. And so the same around sexual energy and yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so a sexual awakening journey is one where we're just paying attention and observing that aspect. Because awakenings happen all the time. People have
Hmm.
split seconds where they realize something they didn't realize before, but rarely are we giving it enough attention for it to actually be fully integrated into our
Hmm.
lives. And so that's what all of this is just calling attention to, that these things happen frequently, but the awareness and almost the love and the care around that heightened awareness is really what makes it different.
So, and so where did your own journey start? Or I mean that might be a too broad a question, but if you could talk a little bit about your own sexual awakening journey, what would feel the most pressing to share or key or central?
Yeah. I think the important thing about an awakening, and whether this is sexuality or spirituality or, having a medicine journey, is that it's not always necessarily like this. Like an awakening can be a soft caress on the cheek where you get to open your eyes and they dilate and it's really coming into the world, or someone can literally take you by the shoulders and be like, wake the fuck up. And
Cold
so
water.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
both happen, and everybody experiences both sides of those things. So for me, when I think about my sexual awakening journey, my first sexual awakening was actually my exposure to rape when I was 14. And that exposure um, was actually the thing that, oh, this energy in the world really plays a big part of how we connect and how we understand one another. And from there, I actually went on this journey where I was trying to find a place where I could talk about it, where I could be open about my sexuality, where I could
Mm-hmm.
share what had happened with me, because I grew up in the Midwest in a Muslim household where those things just were not talked about. And what ended up happening was I kind of followed a trail to New York City where I ended up in fashion. And to me, fashion was this world where everybody wore their sexuality on their sleeve. And it was the place where everybody showed up and they could be really sexual. And after I worked in the fashion industry for many years, I realized that actually the fashion industry was just a place where everybody wanted to use sex to sell everything,
Mm-hmm.
but no one actually wanted to talk about it. So after years of being like, I want to create this product and talk about this thing and bring this conversation into what we're doing and being told no all the time, I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this myself. And that was when the porn cinema concept arrived to me,
Mm-hmm.
and decided that I was going to just gather people around, and that every time we were having an open and honest conversation where people could be themselves and talk about sexuality, that was exactly undoing all of the harm that anybody's been through where they've experienced something and they can't talk about it. Um, so that's really the journey for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it still feels really vulnerable to talk about an awakening in a way
Yeah.
that, could be actually an exposure to rape, because that causes trauma. But creating from that has actually become this really big purposeful thing for me. So it feels important to talk about it, although like my armpits are sweating and it's like difficult to say.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and inspiring too. Uh, and also you for so I Aisha and I have been knowing each other for a couple of years now, I think, and I've been seeing the trajectory that this porn cinema took from like a bunch of people in the basement to House of Yes in New York and locations in LA, and I don't remember which other cities. Just like, oh wow, like you can create those spaces, and yeah, seeing you drive and that creative force was very inspiring for me in like getting where I'm at today. So yeah, also thank you for that.
Yeah, we've
uh
had a very entangled journey into becoming where we are, which is just like, that's why it warms my heart to be here with you, because I love to
mm,
do this. And like, we've been talking about these concepts and this way of
mhm.
being in the world, and here we are. So I acknowledge you too. I'm so excited to be sitting across from you doing this.
Thanks. And piggybacking again on the vulnerability thing, uh yeah, when I was preparing this interview, I was wondering what was the definition of sexual awakening? What did you mean by that exactly? And then reflecting on my own life and being like, I don't know if I've had mine yet. It's still very much a work in progress, and I've had many moments over the last few years where, yeah, little things. Uh, I discovered what sexuality could be beyond what I used to think, whether with tantra and healing through sexuality, or with kink and BDSM, and both again the psychological healing side that can come from it, but also just the playful side, and the acceptance of all the desires within a safe container, is talking about right within the BDSM container of talking about desires, boundaries, respecting each other's boundaries, etc. But still, this a priori idea that I'm not going to shame whatever it is that you're into, and that was very illuminating. But I'm still realizing even today how many layers of shame there are, and how even so for me, who's a nerd about those topics, and that's been my life for the last 4 years or so, there's still every day like stuff where I'm just like, oh wow, yeah, there's still these things I'm not fully owning, or these things I don't feel comfortable with, or oh, that thing I was okay with in that situation, but in this other context, a container, I feel like I have to hide it again. And so realizing that there's been some acceptance, but not going all the way again. And yeah, uh, it's a process.
It is such a process. And, you know, if we believe in this type of thing, which I do, it's like the universe is constantly giving us the opportunity to like, okay, you learned this little bit. Now look, let's put it in this context and see if that
Hmm.
actually like holds true. And I completely hear about what you're saying. Like as someone who it's my purpose and my drive to do this, I still put shame on myself. Like I recently went through a experience where I have always been a big proponent of casual sex. I don't believe that sex needs to be, something that we're doing for procreation or for marriage or XYZ in our traditional context. And I went about a casual sex experience for which I would have typically gone about one. All good, lots of consent, very healthy conversation. And afterwards, I just wasn't into it. And I was like asking myself, like, holy shit, Aisha, do you need to be in love with everyone that you have sex with now? And like the shame that came over me for being like, wow,
Uh-huh.
you've like really been a proponent of this. And things change. And like those
Yeah.
little moments of awakening to yourself of like, here's another layer. And how do I meet it with kindness and compassion and love and empathy for where I
Hmm.
am and the signals that are coming. So I totally understand that. And many, many layers every single day.
Awesome. All right, now changing gears. Let's talk about psychedelics and drugs. What's your journey with the psychedelics in general? How long have you been familiar with them, and what did they bring you on this path?
Yeah. So I just turned 30, and my first ever psychedelic experience was when I was 19. So I guess 11 years. Um, my journey with psychedelics have been like a wild love affair. I absolutely adore them. I think the medicine is one that just helps us come into and own all of these parts of self that we're talking about. Um, I have always had one where very honoring and respectful of the power that I know they could bring. And I really owe that to a group of friends I had in college who were all from San Francisco and had all grown up in the culture that I did not grow up in the Midwest. I didn't even know what drugs
Hmm.
were until I got to college. So you plop me in the middle of Manhattan where every single thing and every single person who is available for that thing is there. And I had a really soft awakening to psychedelics.
Hmm.
My friends, when they introduced me to LSD, the first entire year that I took it, they only gave me a quarter of a dose because they wanted me to understand what it felt like and how to take care of myself. They would do this thing where we would frequently go to festivals, and whoever was the person who was like most in their trip, that was the person they sent to go get the water because they wanted that person to know you're safe, you can do this, and we're right here if you need anything. And what's interesting about that is now what I know about childhood psychology is like that is actually the foundation for safe exploration, is having a foundation that you know you can come back to and you're going out to do a scary explorative thing. So without
Hmm.
any of us knowing that, we were really laying a very solid foundation for later what would become known to me as my like solo expedition trips, where I'm like really going inside and finding some things that maybe are scary or hard to confront. But I have that really solid core of like, I will be okay. I can figure my way out of this. I can surrender. Um, so that's been my journey over the last 11 years. Definitely started in more of a recreational context and developed
Hmm.
into a very symbiotic understanding of just exploration.
Yeah. Mm, I mean, this is such a wholesome and awesome way to start. Having having a group of people with so much intentionality and care around the experience. Because psychedelics are not innocuous. Uh, you can have very unpleasant experiences with them as well. but set and setting, so set meaning the mindset, the intention, and setting meaning the environment in which you do it, affects your experience so much that, yeah, having such a slow, careful, yummy introduction to that world is definitely, yeah, so something that sounds wonderful. And I got a taste of because my first time doing LSD was with you, holding space and like babysitting me at a festival. And yeah, so I got that care. And on the child psychology thing that you mentioned, I don't know if you heard, there's like two related notions, and it sounds like these people were both for you. It's amazing. One is safe haven, and the other one is secure base.
Mm.
And so safe haven is I can go to you for support when I need,
Mhm.
and secure base is you're encouraging me to explore outside of you.
Mhm.
It's the two sides of the attachment figure, and it sounds like these people were like literally both, and that's and intentional and not just by chance, like really thinking about those questions and doing that together. So that's really, really awesome.
Yeah. Without really knowing that that's what they were doing, because do not get me wrong, we were running around these festivals like, but
Yeah.
without knowing anything, it was
I get
just
it.
love. And that's kind of, it points to the innateness of love and kindness in this parenting fashion, that we can all do it for each other at any point in time, as long as we're leading with love and care of each other. And that's really
Mhm.
cool to me.
Awesome. So now, from those first experiences 11 years ago, I'm assuming it wasn't about sex and sexual awakening right away. So, where did the two journey and ended up merging?
Um, it was really a light bulb moment. Um,
Hmm.
I was developing the sexual awakening program, and as something that I've felt really, really strongly about, I've seen the journey happen enough, whether the journey happens in a 2.5 hour night or over a longer period of time when I was working with one-on-one clients, to be able to develop a formula. However, I felt that there was really something missing. And I was just sitting at my computer and I was like, why don't I do this? Why don't I just have psychedelics be a catalyzing agent to help people break out of the mold a little bit more? Because I was developing it with meditation, which was helping with the observation, and also exercises, which helps us go in deep. However, if we also use the supportive medicine, it helps our brain just reconfigure itself in a
Hmm.
very supportive way. And
Literally.
yes, literally, that's what the hormonal functions and the neural pathways are doing. And it
Yeah.
really was just this one moment of like, I can, I can, and so I'm going to. And so it was really like a creative artistry spark. It was nothing more than sitting at the computer being like, I love this thing and I love this thing, and I'm gonna put them together.
Hmm. Awesome. So yeah, like just a bubble up thing that came up. And before that moment, were there any experiences in your own path where the two were somehow interlinked, even if you ended up not thought about consciously using one for the other?
Yes, absolutely. Especially with specific medicines. So for me, so much of the experience that I've had with ketamine as a
Hmm.
medicine has been one that's helped me along in my journey, specifically around my trauma. Um, there's been other experiences with other psychedelics, but specifically with sexuality, ketamine has been the one that's been the most helpful. With
Hmm.
LSD and mushrooms, and understanding of feeling and body and identity and context. So with the 30-day journey, we use psilocybin as the medicine, and that's most helpful in the mind body connection. Um,
Hmm.
And then when I work one-on-one with clients, I typically work with ketamine. And so the interesting aspect there is that each one of them, I think, really belongs to an aspect of our body or our soul or our mind. And so it's really important to get super intentional about what it is that you're trying to work with. So for my journey, yes, many of them have been very helpful in my understanding of self. And it's almost like each medicine that I've used has unlocked a specific key. And that key then has really started to amalgamate into a whole.
Awesome. So little bits here and there, different substances for different things. And today, so I'm curious, you've been doing those journeys for a few months already, I believe. You went the 30-day journey probably. What type of result or changes do people experience?
So some of them are really immediate. So of course, we're going back to the awakening thing. Some things are like this, and some things are a longer journey. You know, some of the things that I bring in, the exercise that I bring in, people will say to me, holy shit, I never thought that this was in there, or I had major, one of the things that we work with a lot is resistance, and being able to observe resistance and then go into resistance. And a lot of people will say to me like, oh, I thought this question was dumb, but then, you know, I just decided to do it. Holy fuck, I just realized all of this stuff that came out of it. People realizing a lot of like hidden shame around things, or, you know, I just got an email the other day where someone said that they consider themselves to be polyamorous. However, when they're writing, they always use partner singular. And they hadn't noticed that until they were taking the time every day to write about it, that there was still some stuff stuck in the old paradigm between using partner instead of partners, and their desire or the way that they manifest into the world as polyamorous. So it can really be all sorts of stuff. I had another friend, client, journeyer, who never talked about anything. They're more of a public figure, never talked about sexuality. Went through the 30-day program, and now I feel like I see every other day there's
That's all
something
I talk
about
about.
sexuality or relationships. So
Yeah.
that's really exciting to see. It can be really small or super major, but it's the intention around paying attention.
Yeah. I laughed a lot when you mentioned resistance because so a few days ago here, I was at an outdoors event and someone had taken a little bit of psychedelics and was having anxiety. So their friend brought them to me because they were like, "Oh, Val will know what to do with that person." and so I just walked them. So like very basic. Can you be okay with that? It's all right. No big deal. Like just super Zendo project type, uh, very very gentle acceptance things. And we were commenting on that with my friend Julian, with whom I'm staying later. And he was like, "Oh yeah, the resistance. That's basically your thing, right?" Talking to me. So yeah, I was just laughing because it's true. Like a lot of, I mean, I'm convinced that just suffering is resistance to what is. That's whether you're on drugs or sober or in life or about sexuality or your professional life or relationships. Suffering is resistance. Resistance to pain. Pain itself or sensations themselves don't have that charge. And yeah, and I remember you talking all about those things about resistance and resonance and stuff like that. And I never realized how parallel the two were until now.
Yes, Val, we're
Uh,
always saying the same thing. We just use
yeah,
different words for it.
which has created some frictions at time.
Yes. Resistances to each other.
Say that again.
I said resistances to each other, which we eventually
Yeah.
surrender to.
With that, I lost my thread. Resistance. Da, 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 da. So, what would you recommend to someone who's interested in exploring their own sexual awakening journey? Say someone's been listening to our conversation for the last half hour or so, they're very intrigued, but like always with people like us that live in the kind of a bubble. They might have been hearing us using many words and they're like, that sounds so cool. But then at the end of the call, they'll be like, wait, so what do I do? So what would you suggest, whether with psychedelics or not, but just like, what would you suggest as a starting point for the inquiry or for resources or things like that?
Hmm. Well, I would say that really watching these kinds of things and starting to immerse in the inquiry itself is really important. Like that is already a step on the journey. So
Mm-hmm.
if someone is watching this and they are interested in these things, like you're already doing it, like be proud of yourself for taking this step because each little step adds up to really big things.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the really big first step on that journey, on any journey I go to, is setting an intention. And that intention can be very, very loose. It can be, I desire to know more about myself. That can be it. It can be very, very simple. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask questions. Ask questions. Asking questions all the time, and do what I call standing on the chair, which is that's basically a big mantra I have. I was once in a kitchen and had this like sudden thought to stand on the chair I was sitting on. And initially I go, no, Aisha, don't do that. You don't need to stand on the chair. And then after a second, I was like, it's literally not going to harm anyone for me to stand
Uh-huh.
on this chair. So I got up and stood on the chair. And
Yeah.
just the amount of allowing myself to think and do something that I wanted to do um,
Uh-huh.
led me that much closer to the myself and my intuition and being in alignment. And so the next thing I would say is stand on the chair. When you ask yourself a question, don't tell yourself no. Stand on the chair and just allow what it needs to come out to come out. If you're not harming anyone and you're not doing anything to anyone, stand on the chair and allow yourself to be what wants to come out. And that brings you closer to alignment.
Mm. I like that. It's like giving yourself permission to actually get out of the frame somehow. Yeah, that's awesome. Like a couple of years ago, I wrote a letter to my future self and I completely forgot about it. And my friend posted it to me a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like in it, one sentence was, uh, keep being weird is like a superpower. And it's the same idea of like, yeah, just get allow yourself those things. You just the amount of conditioning, rules, shoulds that we've internalized, and by design we don't see
Mm-hmm.
is crazy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just standing on a chair and seeing what comes up is
Yeah.
a way to like, let's create some friction and see what happens. Ooh, that feels good. Oh wow. Why do I feel that I shouldn't be doing that still?
And it's
Uh-huh.
following the little like breadcrumbs to that feeling of, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
that feels good. And that kind of stuff happens in sexual encounters all the time where we want someone to maybe, stick a wet finger in our ear, but we think that that's strange, so we're not going to ask for it. Or we want to say the word about something, but we don't do it because we feel strange about it. But the more that we somatically follow the trail to that feeling that feels good, we know that
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of pushing through that resistance, we're going to get there. And
Mm.
so practicing that and making that a practice is really important.
I love this because I have the same breadcrumb idea, but for me, it's like follow the stuff that doesn't feel good to know where it comes from. Like, but it's great, and like you do unpack a ton of things, right? And like in IFS, which is like a therapy technique I really appreciate, they talk about trailheads the
Mm-hmm.
same way. Like if you had a strong emotions this week, there'll likely be a young part of you somewhere who's stuck in some past situation getting activated by that. But yeah, also maybe reminder for myself, follow the other breadcrumbs too. The one that lead to like more pleasure and doesn't have to be always work. Sure.
True. It's true.
Yeah.
True. Good reminder.
All right. So before we start slowly closing, is there anything else that you want to add? Any comments or?
No, I would just say it is always such a fucking pleasure to do this with you.
Mhm.
Um, Speaking of safe spaces, you are one of the people who taught me the most about that and about allowing people to be exactly who they are. So I'm thankful to you for inviting me in. I think, wasn't it when, like, the first couple of months of us knowing each other, I kept saying to you, why do I cry around you all the time? And,
You
and
know,
that
you were like, I swear to God, I don't usually cry that much.
and that was a huge awakening to my inner self and to coming into my emotional body. So it's a pleasure to do this with you. I miss you so much. Thank you for
Mm,
creating this container. Thank you for this space for people to come in and hear and start their inquiry in such a gentle manner. And I think with a lot of love and a lot of laughter. So it's
mm.
important. A lot of pleasure in my experience. I have the feel good things here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing about your journey and your experience. Thank you for being such a creative force and setting the bar so high in some ways, but also being inspiring. And if people want to find you, find out about the journey that you mentioned, where can they go to?
They can find me on Instagram, Smutty
Mm-hmm.
Hussain. Also, smuttyhussain.com if you're interested in having a phone chat. I'm always available for that too. Yeah, super easy
And
and open.
and when is the next journey starting? Do you have a date yet?
Yes, the next journey starts on April 12th.
Awesome.
Yes, the next
Well,
next
thank you
new
so. Mhm. Next. Oh yeah, you do. Sweet. All right. Thank you, Paul. We
Hi,
love you.
Paul. Hi, Val.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy LA. Enjoy the sun. If I fly to the West Coast in the next 6 months, I'll let you know.
Yes, please do.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, darling.
Ciao, ciao. Love you. Bye bye.
Love you.